Hello friends! Hope you guys have been having a wonderful start to 2026. What I have for you for today is I think a pretty interesting mix between Sky Striker and the Mitsurugi. The idea for this combination is pretty simple. Sky Striker can easily bridge into Mitsurugi via Zero summoning 2 level 4 bodies for a Habaki researcher, and vice versa. Mitsurugi can also go into Sky Striker, somewhat, by using Camellia to dump engage. Now, people have used the Sky Striker cards in Mitsurugi before, but they were just mostly using it as a turbo rank 4 engine to summon King of the Pharaoh Imp, so they were much more focused on the Mitsurugi package itself. My list here, however, is of course a lot more emphasized on Sky Striker, making use of a lot more elements of the archetype that some of the other lists would omit. And I do gotta say that this list works surprisingly well, using both of the archetype's strength to cover each other's weaknesses. Sky Striker have a lot of board control tools, and is of course excel at generating extra resources, while Mitsurugi have a powerful recurring board present with Murakumo, Futsu, and Great Purification. As for the decklist itself, the list that I built here is a pretty good baseline for this kind of deck idea. I'm mostly just running the core part from both Sky Striker and Mitsurugi, without almost any non-engine outside of hand traps. The one advantage that you have in your deck building here is that you will not need to run a lot of filler spells like Upstart Goblin or Into the Void in the list like this, because Mitsurugi naturally run a lot of spells themselves that can enable your Sky Striker cards. For the Mitsurugi engine, I'm opted to play a heavier package so I can include more spells like Pre-Preparation of Rites and Mitsurugi Mirror. But if you want, you can also run a smaller package of Mitsurugi to lean more into Sky Striker or to run more non-engine. If you want some adjustment to the package, Night-Soul Serpent is a very cuttable card. I find that you often won't need it, and it is definitely a card that you don't want to draw in your hand. If you are struggling against K9, the Nagitama is a very good card to include to counter Izuna. As for the Sky Striker engine, I'm running 1 Linkage, 2 Widow Anchor, 1 Afterburner, and 1 Nameless Gate. Basically the minimum amount you need to still have access to the full Sky Striker playbook. You can definitely adjust the Sky Striker package here depending on your preference. I just like my list to stay as close to 40 cards as possible. The extra deck is pretty tight, but there is still a couple of flex slots in this list, mostly in the XZ monster, like some of the rank 4s and the zombie vampire. I just mostly include them for consistency, but they rarely do come up in my games. I think you might do better with extra copies of Kokari or Zero in these slots, or even a card like Photon Load. Some alternatives you can consider include the classic Typhon or the newer addition to the game like the Gorgon or the Fancy Ball. Overall, I definitely enjoyed my time playing this deck. I think it is a very cool flavor of both Sky Striker and Mitsurugi. The deck is not the easiest to pilot, it for sure have a lot of nuance to it, like for example getting your Mitsurugi monster off the board to trigger your Sky Striker spells at the right moment. But that also means that the deck has a high ceiling potential that reward good plays and sequencing. And that is all for me for today's video. I hope you guys have been enjoying this version of Sky Striker. Good luck in your games and see you next time!